After days of warnings, Hurricane Florence is now battering the coast of the Carolinas in America. More than 150,000 people are already without power, even though it's yet to make landfall. Florence has been downgraded to a Category 1 storm, but it's still life-threatening, and storm surge and flooding are expected for days to come. All across the Carolinas, the rain and wind has been causing havoc. In Topsail Beach in North Carolina, part of this BP petrol station was blown over. First the lights went out, then it toppled and it was pushed across the forecourt by the wind. Well, just a short time ago, I spoke to NBC correspondent Miguel Almaguer about the situation in Wilmington.
These are just the outer bands of Hurricane Florence that are expected to make a bullseye where we're standing here in Wilmington, North Carolina. The hurricane-force winds that we're now beginning to feel are just the early effects of what will likely be a major hurricane rolling into this area in about 12 hours or so. I can tell you over the last several hours, the wind speeds here have picked up. The rain is now blowing sideways. It is whipping across this area. Power has been lost to at least 160,000 people, though energy officials tell us that number could climb to 3 million in the days ahead. Two big concerns here are, number one, the storm surge, which could reach up to 13 feet high and go up to 2 miles inland. That's just one concern they have that many fear will be deadly. The other is this sustained flash flooding that will come across this area because of all the rain that's falling at this hour. We could get upwards of 4 feet of rain here, and that means many local communities could be swimming in water for several days. Here in Wilmington, the mayor tells us that first responders are standing by at the ready for emergency responses, but right now at this hour, it's too dangerous for anyone to go outside and venture down the street. We're safe here at a location hunkered down next to our hotel, but for anyone who's venturing out on the streets, these certainly can be life-threatening situations.
Well, you mentioned people are being told not to leave their homes, but, are there residents still there? There were mass evacuations that were ordered.
Yeah, we know that they had told about 1.7 million people to head inland to safer ground. We know they have closed bridges that lead out towards the beaches. It's unsafe for anyone to be out in that area, and for anyone that is, they're now told to hunker down. While the evacuations were mandatory, not everybody heeded them. They weren't breaking a law by staying behind if they decided to hunker down in their homes. And we've met several people that have decided to do that, and they are now riding out the storm in these conditions, and it will get worse as the hours go on.
Russia's biggest ever military exercises are continuing in Siberia. But what message is the Kremlin sending by flexing its military muscle, with China involved too? Euronews' Galina Polonskaya reports from Siberia.
Russia insists that those drills are just the regular ones and that they are intended to check the capability of the Russian troops to defend the country. Vladimir Putin yesterday said that Russia doesn't have any aggressive plans against any country in the world. He said that in front of a military parade after the drills where China, Russia and Mongolia were fighting together, shoulder by shoulder. And I was there with other journalists. We were brought there by a huge, massive, the biggest in the world helicopter, Mi-26. And after we saw such helicopters and other tons of military equipment in action, the allies were holding a massive attack. For example, every minute, 6 shells were hitting every 100 meters of the land. And at the end, the mutual imaginary enemy was completely destroyed. It was the biggest deployment of Chinese troops out of the country ever, and China, that had used to be a strategic threat for Russia, now is becoming its strategic partner. So yesterday China learned some strategy lessons from Russia, lessons that Russia got to learn in Syria. I saw plenty of Chinese journalists at those drills, and the Chinese media are writing openly for the first time that this strategic relationship is a very important one. They are trumpeting it, and they say that this new relationship will influence and hit the hegemony of the United States in the world. Now, Vladimir Putin said that those drills show that Russia is capable to defend itself and will support the allies if needed. I've spoken with the deputy military attaché of the French embassy in Moscow yesterday, and he told me that maybe there is a hidden geopolitical message in all of it, but this message could be different for each side. Galina Polonskaya, Euronews from Chita.
The Governor of the Bank of England has issued a stark warning to the British Cabinet that a no-deal Brexit could bring consequences as severe as the 2008 financial crisis. While painting a bleak picture, Governor Mark Carney reportedly warned that house prices could fall by over 30%. Unemployment could reach double-figure percentages and European transport links could stall. And to break this down with us, we've got Euronews' correspondent Vincent McAviney, who's joining us live from outside the Bank of England in London. Vincent, thanks so much for being with us. You know, these are dire warnings. What's the government's position on this?
Good morning, Isabel. Well, it's hard to believe, but tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of Lehman Brothers collapsing, the height of the 2008 financial crisis. And that is the spectre that Bank of England Governor Mark Carney raised at this special cabinet meeting yesterday in Downing Street. The whole cabinet was there to discuss no deal. What would happen on March 29th, 2019 if the UK crashed out of the EU? Now, Mark Carney was snuck in via the back of Downing Street. He didn't walk up the front, and he gave his analysis of what would happen. The Prime Minister had asked him to come especially to do this, and he said that a stress test run by economists here at the Bank of England said that property prices would fall by some 30% over 3 years. There would be higher borrowing rates, there would be a rise in unemployment to the double figures, and he painted a pretty bleak picture, saying it would be like 2008 all over again. Now, the reports that have come out from Cabinet say that the Brexiteers that were in the meeting were quite quiet. They didn't raise any objections. Normally that side has accused Mark Carney of scaremongering, but it seems, according to the Sun newspaper, that two Remainers, Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, and Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, were the ones that really criticised Mark Carney for this projection. Matt Hancock himself, as a former Bank of England economist, he questioned the model that had been used, and these are both two men who might be looking at leadership bids after the Prime Minister is going. So I think it's interesting that the Sun has got wind that they raised objections to this kind of projections. But Mark Carney spelling out for the British government just why he's decided that he will stay on for an extra 6 months beyond his expected end of term next year.
And this really does beg the question, how detailed are the government's plans for a kind of a no Brexit deal?
Well, yesterday, Dominic Raab, the Brexit Secretary, wrote an article in which he said he told Michel Barnier that in the event of no deal, he wouldn't be paying the UK's financial settlement, some 32 billion euros. He also released the latest tranche of around 80 no-deal documents. We had 24 last month, and they were on things like food labelling and nuclear research. This time round we had 28, and they were things that were much closer to home for people. It was passports. Apparently you'll need 6 months validity on your passport, like when you travel to America currently, if you go to the EU after the Brexit date, if there is no deal. Driving licenses. Our driving licenses may not work anymore. We might need to pay for an extra international one. And mobile phone roaming charges. That was one of the biggest successes of the EU, scrapping those in recent years. There is now no guarantee, it seems, that those won't be coming back in. So for people at home, lots of no-deal Brexit news. We're expecting more of those papers to be released over the coming weeks in this sort of drip-feed strategy that the government has got to keep up the pressure on its own MPs to support the Chequers plan. And just last night as well, the French Europe Minister, Nathalie Loiseau, she was speaking at Chatham House here in London, talking about what would happen in the event of no deal, talking about the French plans, but warning that if there is no deal on March 29th, 2019, British planes may not be able to enter French airspace, and the Eurostar, which departs not far from here at King's Cross, St Pancras, wouldn't be able to continue travelling to France. So a pretty stark warning all round yesterday.
US President Donald Trump has been criticised for disputing an official estimate that nearly 3,000 people died in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Well, Angela in the Cube has been following that story. Angela?
That's right, Isabel. Now, for those who might not remember, Hurricane Maria caused widespread, devastating damage. It triggered heavy floods which left many people homeless and without food and water. Well, Donald Trump has rejected the official data, the official death toll estimate. And in a tweet, he said 3,000 people did not die in the two hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico. Now, he mentions two hurricanes here, but in the official data released by George Washington University, they say that their 2,975 excess deaths estimate in Puerto Rico were due to Hurricane Maria specifically. Now, Donald Trump went on to say in another tweet that he blames the Democrats. He said that they were doing this in order to make me look as bad as possible. Well, as I said, this official death toll estimate came from the George Washington University, and they said it also looked at the aftermath, looked at between September 2017 and February 2018 with their data. Now, the governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rossello, has tweeted in response, and he has said, "This is not the time to deny what happened." Another person stepping into this debate, Washington Post journalist Samantha Schmidt, who said the island had a total infrastructure collapse. And she goes on to say that as time went by, it did not get up by too much. And she says she knows this because they spent time speaking to those families affected. Now, another person who has stepped into this debate is Martin Henrich, who is the US Senator from New Mexico. And he said he's sickened by President Trump's comments disputing those official figures. And he says that Donald Trump has focused more on rewriting history than protecting the lives of citizens. Now, some people siding with Donald Trump, including Breitbart journalist Charlie Spearing, saying he's right about those figures in the storm. Those figures don't match up, but he also is not looking at this information here. George Washington University specifically say that it relates to the months after the Hurricane Maria as well. So all of this as the east coast of America is preparing for another catastrophic hurricane.